All right, I'm here with Taylor Udell, who is the head of growth at Champify. Champify is helping companies drive efficient growth and prevent churn by monitoring job changes. And I wanted to have her on because I had Todd Busler on a couple of weeks ago, who is the founder and CEO of Champify. And I would say that Todd and Taylor and the team at Champify is really spearheading founder-led marketing, and more than that, executive-led marketing, people-led marketing. We're going to go into that on LinkedIn and how they're leveraging their own personal brands to drive growth for Champify. So Taylor, thank you for joining.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start maybe with, well, first, if people don't know exactly what I'm talking about, they should check out your LinkedIn and Todd's LinkedIn because you guys put out incredible content. Maybe take me back to, I'm having a lot of conversation, obviously, with heads of marketing and also founders, CEOs who are thinking about this type of motion, founder-led marketing, personal branding, creating content on LinkedIn through their executives. Talk me through the birthing process, let's say, of this motion and just this program of who had the idea, how did you guys start thinking about whether to do it or how to do it, and then how did you guys get started?
Yeah, so I think the first thing and the reason why we really started to experiment this is thinking about where your audience lives. The people who we are trying to connect with are sales and marketing leaders. And often our practitioners are BDRs or AEs. And those are people who spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. So this is one of the first times that I've had such a clear audience channel fit. I think if you're going after developers, things look really different. I've seen success on still founder brand, but it's like AMAs on Reddit or streaming on Twitch, or you have to find the right kind of medium and channel where your audience lives. And the way we started is Todd was posting a few things haphazardly on LinkedIn. We were just getting
last year, or
let's see, this is probably last year. So I joined Champify in July of last year. So I guess I'm on month 9 or something. But before I've worked with Todd in the past. And so, he'd call me up with marketing questions. So I think we had even started talking about it before I joined. And essentially what we found is that you just got a lot of eyeballs, right? Which is a really hard thing to do as a small company. You don't have a ton of budget. Usually paying for eyeballs is one of the most expensive things you can do, which is why it's so important to stay focused and, narrow at the beginning of any company tenures, because it costs a lot of money to get your message to go broadly. And so we saw a lot of eyeballs. We saw a lot of likes. We saw a lot of engagement. It would pique people's curiosity, and Todd would just get some inbound DMs being like, oh, that's really interesting, can you tell me about this problem? And eventually it would lead to a meeting for us.
And that was, sorry to interrupt, I'll keep doing this. This was just Todd doing this on his own kind of thing, or was there any okay.
We're just kind of experimenting. I think we saw a couple of people who we respect, who are pretty early adopters. We've been big fans of Dave Gerhardt, who I think has built an amazing brand on LinkedIn. I think Devin Reed has done an awesome job building valuable content on LinkedIn, and it still felt early enough. Now it's getting a little bit more saturated, right? Because people are picking up, but it was still early enough. We're hey, they're getting an audience. It's our audience. We talk to them. We like them. Clary's a customer of ours. So we're constantly, they have a really strong go-to-market motion. We're constantly looking to them, for kind of inspiration. And so we were kind of hey, it seems to be working for people we respect in the market. Let's just try organically posting a few things. And that kind of led to a few meetings. And then I was I was talking to someone who's trying to sell me something, and they mentioned thought leadership ads, which I had never heard of before on LinkedIn. And I was well, what is that? Because I was putting money behind occasional posts of Todd's, just to amplify the reach. And they're oh, you can just sponsor content from basically anyone on LinkedIn. So we started to dabble with thought leadership ads probably back in October. So that was like 3 or 4 months of just like organic posting. And then in October, I started just putting money. I'm like, you know what? That's a really great idea. Like Todd has really great content. It's not about Champify. Sometimes it's about problems we're solving. But a lot of the time it's just about like, what are the day-to-day problems you face as a seller or a sales leader? And like, how are we approaching it? Or we're talking to leaders all of the time, marketing leaders, sales leaders, about how they're thinking about pipeline generation, how they're thinking about team enablement, how they're thinking about evaluating tech stacks. So I was like, what happens if I just make this the ad in October? So I started putting money, and I would switch out the posts I put money behind, and I would target them at the accounts where our BDRs were prospecting. So we have a really narrow account list. Yep. And so it's really easy to say like, okay, like these, 200 accounts, that's what we care about this quarter. Like, I'm just going to make sure that they know who Champify is. So when you call them, like Will or Nate or, Brian or like anyone on our go-to-market team, when you call them, they might have heard of Champify, and that will make it easier. Totally. Or they might have heard of Todd, or like, maybe you can even talk to someone who has like a post of Todd's or something like that. And then what we found actually is that the click-through rate is insane.
I'm gonna stop you here because I want to dive into thought leader ads a little bit more in depth. I want to just backtrack a little bit. So just to recap, so one, you guys, your ICP is go-to-market people. So one, the SDR, BDR, AE, and then leadership, head of sales, CRO type of. These people live and breathe on LinkedIn. So that was number one, where you guys just thought from a audience match standpoint, LinkedIn as a platform, which just makes total sense for us to be present because that's where our ICP lives. Then Todd was kind of posting here and there, doing it himself. And you guys just saw some qualitative data that every now and then someone reached out or they found out about you or they booked a demo because of it. Nothing like major, nothing like perfectly tracked. It was just qualitatively here and there something happened. But I think then, and this is what Todd and I chatted a little bit about, there was also process or discussion around, well, let's take this actually seriously. Let's not just, have Todd here and there post something, and maybe it does get in demo every now and then, but let's make it a real program, dedicate time and effort and budget to it. And I think there was some conversation, some convincing you had to do, because Todd is obviously a busy person, as most founders and CEOs are. So like, talk to me through that conversation and how you guys decided that, okay, let's do it for real now.
So I think that's probably when I started putting money behind it. I started to think like, hey, like this should be something we're leaning into. Like, we need to create some sort of experiment so that we can measure it, right? I don't like to do anything that I can't, when I think about putting money or time as a lean team into something, it has to be time bound. It has to be like a measurable output. It doesn't matter if it's like in a strict measurement, right? But you do want to see like an uptick on something, especially when things are like kind of hard to measure, to understand if it's worth real investment. So Todd and I started talking about it, and I think many people get this. They're like, yes, this is a good idea. We should do it. And so that's where we started with like, yeah, okay, that problem, that was not hard at all to get this is a good idea. Clearly it's working for some people. Let's do it. And then what that looks like is like maybe like 1 week of consistency and then 3 weeks of like nothing. And then a reminder like, hey, like we said, we were going to commit to it. How should we commit to this? All the meanwhile, like we're still running those ads. So I'm collecting some data on like engagement. You can see how many people visit your website after viewing a thought leadership ad. And so we're like, okay, we did a false start, and that's like basically in October, like after Thanksgiving, it was like, okay, like we said, we're going to invest in it. Let's try it again. Maybe we'll sit together and we'll just have like a time block on the calendar, and we'll just like, do do it together to have this kind of like buddy accountability. And what ended up happening is we actually just like push those meetings because there's always something that is more urgent, not necessarily more important, but more urgent to take care of. So then kind of like the end of the year, I'm like, look, we're going to either be in on this or we're kind of going to be out. Like, here's all the reasons why I think we should be in on it. We saw on the click-through rates, it was like 4x. We have like 4x the click-through rate at a minimum of our best campaign.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like 12 something percent engagement rate. So people are reading it.
Yeah.
There was, if you look in LinkedIn, you can see like company engagement with your profile. We were seeing kind of follower growth correlated. We were seeing some of the target accounts that we really wanted to work, starting to engage and follow our page. And so, we both kind of like looked at this data, like we should be in, how are we going to be in? And then the next step was like actually hiring like a writing coach to help Todd, not only with, LinkedIn has like special like formats that it likes better. People like to read things better. The hook is really important when it comes to LinkedIn posts, but also when you pay for something, especially when you have a smaller budget, like it's a non-trivial part of our budget to make sure that he has that accountability. And when you're paying for something, just like I think I put in my post, but like just like when you're paying for a gym, or if you pay for a personal trainer instead of a gym membership, every level up you go, it kind of increases your like buy-in. And then there's also a set time where you like are paying for this person's time. So like you better make use of it. So we started doing that.
I want to just recap that, or because I think the takeaway here for other marketers who are thinking about, who think this is a good idea and who want to try to approach their founder and CEO and convince them. I think the brilliant thing that you did is, number one, position it as an experiment instead of saying, hey, we're going to shift and this is going to be our number one go-to-market channel for real forever. And this is what we're going to do. It's like, hey, like we're getting some good indicators here. We clearly know our ICP is on LinkedIn. We're already booking some demos here. Our thought leader ads are showing some indicators. So how about we make it we do a push and we do a time-bound experiment at the end of which we want to see some real measurable, trackable things to do it. And I feel like it's much easier to get buy-in to that than say, let's just do this, forever.
Yeah.
Now let's put some, from your perspective, and I'm sure that's different for every company, but in terms of time-boundedness and in terms of results or measurable stuff that happens, what do you think is a good goalpost to put here? Like how long should you give it? Yeah.
Basically, we created a couple of different things: leading indicators, lagging indicators. The first was like, if we are not growing eyeballs on content, because Todd already had like 7,000 or 8,000 followers, like it wasn't small, but it was, if we are not growing content or growing eyeballs on Todd's account within a month, then it's not worth our money, at least, because we put money behind it. So we had a follower goal where we were trying to grow like 30%. So it was super aggressive.
In a month. From 7. Okay. That's like 2,100 people.
Yep.
So you're
it was like 2,000 followers. We were like, we want to get close to 2,000 followers in a month. Now, if we had hit 1,500... Is that with the thought leader ads
on top of it, or it's just purely organic? Because you're also running thought leader ads.
It's with the thought leader ads on top of it, but the spend was like, I don't know, it's like capped at $20 a day. It's not.
That's good. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It's enough for an experiment, but it's not like...
Yeah.
People will see your
ad
to get 2,000 followers in a day. Right. Yeah. I actually think that most of the followers come from organic, and the thought leadership ads just guarantee that your target accounts are seeing it based off of the way the numbers look out. But that's a different topic. So we had an aggressive growth goal of like, hey, we're going to try and hit like 2,000 followers within a month. And if we don't do that, then like it doesn't make sense to necessarily pay for a writing coach. So that was like the first goal. Yes, we did hit it.
Wow.
The first month 1 of January, and it was actually like pretty crazy. And we're seeing a little bit of channel fatigue. I think LinkedIn has changed some algorithm things, which, is always going to happen on another platform. And then also when you try anything for the first time, you're always going to have the spike and then the plateau. So the real question that came next is like, what is the plateau going to look like? Is this just a spike, or is it like going to level off at a place where we feel happy about our strategy? So
do you feel like the 30% was a good goal? Like, let's say you would have grown
that
from
was super
7,000
aggressive
to 8,000, you know,
well,
would have been the right decision to say, nah, look,
it's much smaller now that he's bigger.
right. I'm just saying,
So
if
we
someone
still
else comes to you and they're like, look, we have our CEO has 7,000 followers, you know, would you recommend them shoot for 30%? If you don't hit it, stop?
So my growth goals for myself, I don't have a big following, have been 20% month over month.
Okay.
And I've hit them.
Okay.
I would say if you don't hit, I think 20% is a much more reasonable goal than 30%. If you're not hitting it, I think that there's a couple of things that we also were looking at. The first is we don't post about like Champify. There's not like links to our website in Todd's LinkedIn content. It's primarily problem solution, right? It's just a good advice. And so we're like, okay, does this even translate to anything on our website? And you can see on our website traffic, there is a spike every time he had a post that hit more than like 300 likes. And that's so it's so clearly causational that some of the other metrics like started to matter less. The followers mattered less because it was like eyeballs on his thing, instant eyeballs on our website, same day, same spike. The bigger the post, the bigger the spike on our website. Because I think what happens are people are just like, hey, I'm curious about this guy. Oh, what does this company do? Oh, it's not the right time for me, but like, it's good to know. I'm going to keep following him.
Yeah.
And so we saw basically our January graph, which is when we really doubled down on this as a strategy. We saw spike on there. Like he had like 4 posts that like knocked it out of the park. And there's just these huge spikes on our website traffic. And then, so like, I would check that. Like, hey, you don't hit your growth
Google
goals.
Analytics know that the traffic came from LinkedIn, or was that like direct Google search?
It
doesn't matter. I mean, you know, it's correlated.
Yeah, I was going to say, I know it's correlated. Yeah. It's not all. In fact, I think it's about half from LinkedIn, half direct traffic.
Yep.
Like LinkedIn makes up about 20% of our traffic. Most of it is organic from LinkedIn. It's like 80% organic, 20% paid ads.
Yep.
And we know that because of UTM parameters. So when people are coming directly to the site, where else are they coming from? There's only a few places they could have heard of us, because there's only a few places that we're doing content, right? Like we are doing content on LinkedIn. We will go to in-person events, and we have like word of mouth. And so if you're coming directly to the site, not like through Google search, then that's all we're doing. And word of mouth isn't even something you control. So you kind of know it's easier when you're small to be like, okay, well, the only thing I'm doing, or like it's the main thing I'm doing, or it's the only thing I added. So everything that changes has to be because of the thing, because I'm only changing, going back to the experiment, like I'm only changing one variable at a time. So if you're trying this like LinkedIn strategy with your founder, I would say, don't try any new ads. Don't try like another new tactic on top of it if you really want to be able to measure the effect, like impact things later in the funnel. So maybe you split your time as a marketer thinking, hey, I'm going to try and improve conversion rate on my website, and I'm going to like focus on this, but I wouldn't do a ton of top of funnel. If you're at a smaller company, if you're at a bigger company, it's harder to control those kind of variables. But for us, it was really easy to narrow it down and say like, hey, this is going to be our top of funnel focus for the month.
Did you have to sell website traffic and follower growth to Todd, in the sense that followers and website traffic is something that marketers love to look at? Non-marketers are often like, well, followers and website visits don't pay the bills. I want to see deals and pipeline.
I want to see real money.
Yeah.
No, I think this is something that like Todd and I talked a lot about. So basically, when we're thinking about setting up an experiment, we're setting up goals. We don't know how long this traffic will take to convert, because what we're really playing is for awareness and brand. It is a brand strategy. And so I really feel like brand is kind of a field of dreams approach, where if you build a really good brand, they will come. I don't know if you're familiar with the movie Field of Dreams, but like he builds a baseball field in the middle of like Iowa or something, and then all of the players like come to it. I don't know. It's like build it and they will come is like his like slogan. And so the first goal was like a very measurable, but it's very leading indicator. Who knows if website traffic actually turns to revenue? Who knows if honestly we were going for followers? I thought I was going to say, okay, here's what the followers look like month 1. If we hit that milestone, then let's make sure that our traffic is growing month 2. And then if our traffic grows over 2 months, we better have some of those people enter a buying cycle and our inbound volume better increase. And then we shouldn't see like drop off, right? But like, because it's a long approach, you're basically saying like, hey, I'm creating these checkpoints basically where we have a fail safe. We're like, if we're not seeing what we need to see from the leading indicators, we're going to pull it, because if we don't get the leading indicators, we're not going to get the lagging indicators. But if we get the leading indicators, it tells us that we should actually wait to see what the lagging indicators are. Right. And it honestly happened a lot faster than I thought. Like we saw it inbound increase like that month.
How long is your sales cycle?
Our sales cycle is 45 to 70 days, depending on company size. So
mid-market.
Mid-market.
Yeah.
So it was the lead volume started like pretty much right away. Once again, leads are very top of funnel. They are just a leading indicator. They don't necessarily mean anything for your business, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So, we had, hey, like, let's measure our follower growth. And then it was like, okay, let's measure our inbound volume. And then let's make sure that the conversion rate for our inbound volume to qualified pipeline actually converts. And now we're just into like the revenue stage of kind of that cycle. But the way we set up our experiment is that at every month there was like a different type of goal that's further down the funnel.
So month 1 was 20 to 30% follower growth.
Yep.
Month 2
was like not as quantitative, but it was like we should see inbound volume increase.
Yeah. Okay.
And
that's like website demo requests with self-reported
website demo requests. Yeah. Yes. Well, we weren't even looking for self-reported attribution because once again, it's kind of our primary acquisition strategy. So
if you just see an increase to baseline,
but if you see an increase to baseline, you assume, right? Okay. So a lot of the things are like, okay, it's reason versus like being able to track. But what we started to see, and so all of these like quantitative metrics were bolstered, is that when we would reach out to an account, they had already heard of us before. When we go to an event, people are like, oh, you're from Champify. I've seen you on LinkedIn. So you start to get from the reps, from the founder, from myself, these like qualitative proof points that happen with enough frequency where you're like, this is not a fluke.
Yep.
This is actually working. The other thing is that compared to other tactics, it's like, okay, we sit down, we look at, we could put money here, we could put money here. If we put money, or like we could put time here, we could put time here. And we're like constantly making these trade-offs. I think that's something that I spend a lot of time talking about, is do a few things very, very well. Don't try to spread yourself thin. If you have a strength, just double down on it. Because you only have so much time, you only have so much resources, you only have so much brain space, and you want to be able to tell what's working. So if you try and do a little bit of everything,
right,
who knows? You're throwing spaghetti at a wall. Who knows what's actually sticking? It's impossible to like measure. So, we sit down and it's like, okay, well, I'm not a huge believer in ads. The thing is, because I don't have demand gen background, and I've also not really purchased from like a true product ad before, like maybe a little bit of brand, but I think the brand campaigns do better. And I think I was at Twilio before, and I think they've done such a good job with brand identity for developers that like people might not know what Twilio does, but they like probably have seen the like ask developer. And I'm like, okay, that's like a lot more catchy for awareness. And then once we have awareness, I have to figure out how to, and that's kind of what we're looking on now, like offer continuous value until somebody's in a buying cycle. But I was like, I don't know, like, what are we going to do? Buy a billboard? No. Like, are we going to do a bunch of ads that we've already seen don't really convert into leads at the same rate as this does? No. Are we going to, I don't know, sponsor an event at a booth? And like, booths aren't, I don't know, I don't like them. No. And so when we think about like, okay, one, we're seeing success with this, but two, like, do we have a better idea? That's something we constantly bring up. Do we have a different idea that we think would work more effectively or efficiently, or something that we could like layer and kind of like split our time as we start to grow our system? And at the beginning, it was just the metrics are so spiky and so good that you're like, no, we need to keep double downing on this until we find our natural plateau. And once we start to see like the level off, that's when we're going to layer on another strategy. So it stopped becoming, is this working? And it started to become, when is this, like, when are we going to see some channel fatigue? And that's been the metric that I've been looking for now, is when are we going to see some channel fatigue, so we know how to layer our approach? Or what I also noticed is, we get a lot of awareness. We got a lot of eyeballs the first time. How do we get those people to come back to our website? Because our website right now is just very product focused. There's not a lot of things for you to do or learn or get value from. Mm-hmm. So how can we think about, we've got these eyeballs, how do we keep them? And I think that's kind of like the next stage in the journey. It starts to be like, okay, it's kind of a borrowed audience to, I don't know, quote somebody's language. It's a borrowed audience on LinkedIn, right? You don't own the algorithm, you don't own the connections, you don't own the people. So we've seen that spike. But then how do I convert them into like my audience, where they're always coming back to not just me personally, that's like kind of what the followers does, but coming back to check on Champify and what Champify is doing, and how can I create this even stronger link between the value they're seeing on our LinkedIn content and the value they get from media content, whatever you want to call it, we produce. That's Champify branded. So we have to create a stronger bridge between the two.
I feel like one often common denominator that I feel like I see between companies who scale versus those who kind of plateau is that the ones who scale, they pick a channel and they crush it and they really squeeze everything out of it. And only once they see a plateau, they add one more channel and then they figure out how to crush that one. Versus other ones who they're doing some cold emails, but they're kind of mediocre. And they're doing some LinkedIn, but it's kind of shitty content. And they're doing some Google ads, but it's kind of not really converting. And they have like 15 things going, but none of them is really doing well. So it's like a mishmash of like, and it's not scalable, that approach. So I think besides that you framed it as an experiment, the other smart thing that you guys did was hiring a writing coach and kind of putting some money behind it, because it just, as you said, it makes you more committed. Obviously, one, it helps having a writing coach. And then two, knowing that you're paying someone for that time, not showing up and canceling that call and skipping on the content, you really feel like you're wasting your money. So do you feel like that's a recommendation that you tell people? Like, find a ghostwriter for your CEO, or find a coach, or find a consultant, or put some money behind it, or even run the ads so that you're, putting money behind the ads?
Like, our writing coach is not a ghostwriter. I'm going to be like pretty explicit about that. Yeah. Like, this is really Todd. This is who like Todd is. This is his advice. So I feel like hiring a ghostwriter can be really hit or miss. I don't trust, personally, I'm a little bit of a control freak, as you can probably tell by like my experimentation and the way I like approach things. I don't trust anyone to like write something for me. And like, what I really want is to get better at doing it myself, because like, it's a skill, right? Yep. So like, I think of it as like, how can we build our own skills and like evolve our own learning? So like, if we need to go somewhere else or like try a new tactic, we can like use our learnings and like actually develop that ourselves. As far as like paying for something, I think it just depends on who is your founder, what motivates them, and what's going to get them to carve out time. If you have somebody who's like, really motivated and like wants to do it, but like needs help brainstorming ideas, you might look for somebody else and pay for that. If you have somebody who's like really frugal and they're like, or, you have a lot of money, paying money doesn't matter, then like that might not be the right motivator. Right. It might be more about working with the EA to make sure that they have like time carved out in a way, or a different reward system. Like, I think it just kind of depends on how your founder is motivated. And especially if you're working with like a technical co-founder, you've got to be buttoned up in a different way than a go-to-market co-founder. I think go-to-market leaders are less suspicious of marketing and technical, like being a good technical marketer. And I worked at basically technical companies up until Champify. Like, if you have a technical founder, like the experimentation framing is so much more important in like explaining like how the variables need to be, you know, consistent in order to get an accurate measure, and like how the data works and why the data works and why the system is designed in a specific way and what outputs you're actually looking for and how you're expecting it to translate, in a really education around the thesis and how you're going to measure your hypothesis or the results could be more impactful than hiring a coach. So it really just depends on what's going to make your founder tick, what's going to motivate them to get to that next stage of commitment.
Makes sense. And I'm curious, you know, I mean, you guys set some very ambitious goals. Besides the fact that your audience lives on LinkedIn, go-to-market people, what do you think are the other contributing factor that, I mean, you guys were pretty successful pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
What plays into that?
I think a couple of things. I think some of it is like I am at Champify because I like working with Todd because I think he can teach me good things. And I think like I find value in the things he says, like on a personal basis. I don't, you know, feel like it's fluffy. I don't feel like it's bullshit. I feel like it comes from real learned experience. And I think that kind of translates to LinkedIn, where like he actually has stuff to say. He's done a lot. He's a successful person, and he's also like very no bullshit. I don't know if you talked to him, but he even like in a sales set, he's so like he does not like pull punches. He's not afraid to give himself hard feedback or share like the uglies internally. Like everybody has, you know, some uglies that they're hiding. And I think that level of transparency and the quality of content that he has really leans in. And I think the fact that he's also a practitioner, I think that matters. I think that on LinkedIn, I think that there's some people who are no longer practitioners who are doing a great job on their LinkedIn content. Like I really love like Jen's content on LinkedIn about like sales cycles and opening deals. But I've also seen a lot of I'm just going to call it like influencer content that I'm like, you're so far removed from the game. Yeah. It feels like you lose a layer of credibility for a while if you're not actually like playing the game, or like you don't have like that strong foundational track record. You haven't, you know, risen up the ranks, become a VP of sales, seen what growth looks at every stage. You're not talking to maybe the best in the business because, you know, part of, you know, Todd's background and working at Unusual and also like going through the ranks at Heap and Rising means he got introduced to a lot of phenomenal people who we like go to for advice. And he's built a lot of peers who like we can go to for advice. So I think you get a lot, like the content is so valuable that is actually being produced. And I think that has a lot to do with it. If you have a leader who has nothing to say, then like this is a terrible strategy for you because it's going to come off forced. It's going to be fluffy. It might feel like marketing. It's writing it for your founder, which like kudos to you if you can do that as a marketer. I think that's like a very, very hard skill. Yeah. And if it feels fake, people know. Yeah. Right. If it doesn't feel genuine, or if it doesn't feel tactical, or if it feels too much like a pitch for your own company or a pitch for the problems that your company solves, like maybe people won't catch on right away, but like it will feel less genuine over time. And I think the authenticity in the content and the fact that like it's rough out there right now in B2B tech, like it is not easy. There's a bunch of people who are like fighting to survive. Like that authenticity, sharing some of the hard learnings, like it lands really well based off of like the time and place we are in history, like Todd's background and like the value he has to say, and the fact that he actually has something to say. Like if he hadn't started dabbling on LinkedIn ever organically, would we have leaned in? I don't know, but maybe it would have been too late by the time we realized. But like we already started to see those like connections.
Right. If I had to recap
answer
why it's working so well for Todd is, besides your ICP living on LinkedIn, one, Todd is your ICP. He's a go-to-market person talking to go-to-market people. Two, he's in the dirt every single day right now, having conversations, selling the product, being on demos, doing things, right? That's kind of what you mentioned. Like you could have, like, let's say if you sell to VPs of sales and you've been a VP of sales, but 20 years ago at Salesforce, and since then you've been, I don't know, sitting on boards, it's like you have some credibility and some things to talk about, but you're not in it today anymore and how to do things in 2024. Well, it's like a VC giving advice to founders who the last company that they ran was like 15 years ago. It's like you clearly have stuff to talk about, but it's not quite as relevant as a founder today building a company in 2024. So I think he has that going for him. And then the third thing is what you said with no BS. Like, you know, like, yes, you need expertise. Yes, you need to be in the dirt and doing things so that you're generating insights that are actually relevant. But then you also need to have the guts to actually like cut to the chase and, you know, have maybe sometimes some spicy takes. Because if you just repeat the commonly accepted, you know, best practices in the industry, then it's like, what are you doing, right? You kind of need to have some POV that's different from, and you can't fake that, but you need to be willing to put yourself on the line a little bit.
I think you said that much better than I did. So thanks for turning my rambly commentary.
No, it's my job
But one last thing I think that I will add to it that I think comes through is that he also takes accountability. And I think we kind of live in a world where accountability is not always taken. But like he owns it. It's his thing. It's his responsibility. It's his hiring decisions. It's his, you know, like he's a CEO. He's accountable. And I think it's like owning up and being like, this is mine, also comes through in a way that like it's my decision or my learning or what I did wrong. Or I think a lot of people really like the what I did wrong so they can learn from somebody else's mistakes. But I don't think that you see a ton of content about common missteps, or people aren't willing to fess up that like they weren't prepared for their first board meeting, right? Like who's telling that story? And I think being able to say like, hey, like things don't always go perfectly, and taking ownership over that also adds a layer of like camaraderie. And
I think also to highlight that, how it translates to at least what seems to me to the team is that you started with Todd, but now you're posting, Will, your SDR or head of SDR is posting. And I think if I look at your content, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're talking to marketers. Like when you talk about thought leader ads and your conversion rate there and what you like, you're not trying to appeal to an SDR or AE because that's just not your expertise. Your expertise is what you're doing every single day, which is being the marketing leader, running these ads, running these experiments. You can report on like your self-reported attribution data and 33% heard through. And so like you're attracting a different persona that's more like marketing and demand gen people. And that's great, even if that's maybe not 100% your ICP, but it's definitely in the realm of the people who should be aware of you guys. And it's going to do much better than if you try to tell an SDR on how to run their sales call when it's just like, you don't know, you know?
It's not my job. I also think what you see today, it's like a little bit more, you know, calculated, but is that buying committees are cross-functional. Budget holders are cross-functional. Decisions are being made both at the top and at the bottom. And so when you think about, you know, and then also like Will, for example, our SDR lead, like he wants to be posting on LinkedIn. It helps him do his job better. And so I think I'm more like the most begrudging person to post on LinkedIn. I'm like, I have a lot of other things, but I know it works. So basically, I guess the experiment was for myself. But I think that when you think about the number of stakeholders involved in deals and evaluation today, like everyone's in the realm of our ICP, everyone's in the realm of our buying committee. They all have potential influence over a deal we can have. And by having the ability to focus on multiple personas, we're just like increasing the penetration where like if our problem comes up at our company, which is a pipeline problem, if you're having a pipeline problem, it might be brought up by an SDR. It might be brought up by a sales leader. It might be brought up by a marketing leader. It might even be brought up by an ops person, right? So if we can be top of mind in any of those conversations that are happening at a company, like that's fucking great. Like that's great for us. And so by just being able to be authentic in our own lanes, I think, you know, we increase the number that like we're increasing the odds for ourselves.
I'm curious if you guys had a conversation about that, but given that this motion is so successful to you guys, when you are now considering new hires for any role, does this play a role where you say, okay, we're hiring our CTO or I don't know, head of product, and ideally we would also want that person to be posting on LinkedIn. So like, does that play a role if they have an audience or they seem to have an affinity or willingness to put out content? Or is it just, if they end up doing it, that's great, but if not, that's whatever?
I don't think I would hire someone for their audience. I think that's like pretty far down on my list, honestly, because I think unless it was like a community leader, right?
Right.
So like very role different, but like I don't think I would think about it for like a product leader. I think it's very much a nice to have for anyone on go-to-market who we hire. And I'm always happy to help people if they want to try and grow theirs. But the reality is that a lot of jobs, like there's like a lot to be done at a company and we don't need to put all of our eggs in the same basket. Like we have pretty good coverage right now.
Let's talk a little bit about, let's talk a little bit about thought leader ads. We have a couple minutes here left. I'm curious to get your take because honestly, my take is a little bit that I feel like they're overrated right now. Mainly being that we run a lot of experiments with that. And I just feel like the amount of money I need to pay to get engagement versus just creating another post and really making a great post. Like I got like one of my best posts recently was about, you know, how I would replicate the Chris Walker, Adam Robinson playbook if I was a CMO. And it got like 60,000 impressions, 250 likes, right? We got like 10 inbound demo requests from that post. And I was like, oh, that post is going to crush once I'm going to run it as a thought leader ad because it already did so well organically. Let me just run it towards CMOs and CEOs of our ICPs. And yeah, it's getting like good engagement relative to other ads, right? If I compare it to the average ad, it's like crushing that. But relative to, can I replicate another organic post similar to that? It feels like that's the much bigger lever than trying to force this post. Like I'm just end up paying a lot for the engagement. Yeah.
So I think there's also things going on where it seems a little bit like people who have done too much. I mean, you never know. It's fun to pick apart the LinkedIn algorithm, but people who've done a lot of LinkedIn leadership ads are seeing like suppression of their organic content is like something I've heard chatter about. Who really knows what's happening?
Black box.
So the way I think about thought leadership ads are, one, I have a cap on it. I'm not spending a ton of money. I think it's like, no, it's not a ton of money. I think it's like, I don't know.
5K a month?
I'm trying to do math. Oh, well below 5K a month.
2K?
Yeah, like it's like 1,500 a month. So it's not very big. Yeah. So like that is not a ton of ad money to see higher engagement in your key accounts. That is fine with me. I don't think LinkedIn thought leadership ads have a ton of impact on the overall engagement of a post. I don't think it has, like the variable I'm controlling with an ad is, are my target people? And I have built a list of the CMOs, the VP of sales, the heads of sales development leaders, And then I have like a below the line thing that I promote like Will's content to a lot of the time because he has like he's like good tactical advice. Like I don't think that's growing the follower. I don't think it's growing the engagement. What I do feel like it's doing is guaranteeing that these people who I really, really care about are getting service the ad, because I cannot control the algorithm and the engagement. I will always get more impact from producing an organic post. And I don't actually promote a post until like 3 weeks later, until like the organic has fallen off. But what the ads do is it gives me more of a guarantee of, are my target accounts getting touched by valuable Champify content on a regular basis. And that is more of like a nurture play than it is an awareness play. So the organic is for the awareness, thought leadership is more for the nurture. And then what I can do off of that, because people are way more likely to engage with a thought leadership ad than a Champify ad, is start to introduce more Champify content in retargeting so that they start to associate our name a little bit more. But it's much more, I think about it from like a nurturing perspective and saying like, okay, like I want to touch this account X amount of times. I don't know what Hockey Sack's producing, but it's like 70 times on LinkedIn or whatever, before they actually convert. Like I want to find high value content that can be associated with my brand, that can touch the people I care most about on a predictable basis. It's not a lever to grow as much as it is to do that. So I think if you think about like the purpose behind it, like it's never going to be, you're never going to get the eyeballs from paying as you are for organic. I think that's just kind of like a rule of marketing. The best marketing is always organic and viral, right? Like that's kind of how you build an awareness in a brand. And so it's the second kind of half of that equation. I was like, okay, there's already people seeing it. I can get 60,000 views, but if they're all, in India, like that's not my target market. I'm not selling to them. It doesn't matter. So
that makes sense. No, I like that. So it's really about common sense of like, is it beneficial to us if the stakeholders that we know we sell into of the target accounts that we handpicked see our CEO and our head of SDR and our head of marketing on their LinkedIn every now and then? Is that a good thing for us? Probably yes, even if we can't directly say, oh, this person saw this ad and then booked a demo. Cool. All right, Taylor, this was awesome. Thank you so much for your time. I learned a ton, and I love that you guys are, out there, not just building this motion, but also sharing all the learnings in public. So thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.